I'll never forget that night. The night everything changed. Darian and I were having our usual Wednesday dinner when a nagging feeling compelled me to check his phone. I knew the passcode, so I discreetly took it to the bathroom and scrolled through his messages. That's when I saw them. The explicit texts and photos between Darian and some woman named Clarissa. My heart pounded as I read through the exchanges, explicit details of their sordid affair laid bare. I felt sick to my stomach but composed myself before returning to the table. "Working late again tonight?" I asked in a measured tone, trying to mask the storm raging inside me. Darian looked up, his expression casual. "Yeah, big project at the office. Might be another late one." "I see." I took a slow sip of wine, then slid his phone across the table. "So who is Clarissa?" His face went pale as his eyes landed on the incriminating phone. For a long moment he said nothing. I watched anger, fear, and panic flash across his features before he regained composure. "Marla, I can explain," he began, the pathetic words already ringing hollow. "Explain what?" I snapped. "How you've been screwing this woman behind my back, sending her dirty pictures and messages about all the things you want to do to her?" Darian swallowed hard but didn't respond. His eyes averted from my furious glare. "Well?" I demanded. "Say something." "It's not that simple." Not that simple. I slammed my palms on the table, causing the plates and glasses to rattle. "How dare you sit there and lie to me after this? You disgust me." Darian opened his mouth, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it. We're done here." I stormed out of the kitchen, grabbing my purse and keys from the hall closet. Darian stayed seated, frozen and silent as I flung open the front door. "Where are you going?" he finally called out in a feeble voice. I whirled around, rage and hurt burning in my eyes. Anywhere but here, with anyone but you. With that, I slammed the door behind me and walked out into the night, each step fueled by anger, betrayal, and a sinking realization that my life would never be the same. As I collapsed onto the driver's seat, hot tears streaming down my cheeks, one thought pounded in my mind. How could the man I loved, the man I trusted, throw away everything we had built for some cheap affair? That was the night the foundation of my life cracked wide open. Little did I know, the disturbing revelation of Darian's infidelity was just the tip of the iceberg. His betrayal extended much deeper, threatening to utterly decimate my family, my career, my entire world. But in that moment I could only process the death of my heart and my undying rage toward the man I once called my soulmate. In the days following my confrontation with Darian, our marriage unraveled at light speed. I temporarily moved in with my brother Keith while I got my bearings and decided next steps. Darian tried pleading for forgiveness, but his words rang hollow. "It was just a fling, a stupid mistake," he'd say over the phone. "I still love you, Marla. We can work through this." I stopped taking his calls after the third day. The man I once trusted had lied and cheated without remorse. Why should I believe a word he said now? In my heart, our marriage was dead. It didn't take long for me to learn the full extent of Darian's betrayal. During my absence, I had my lawyer draft letters granting access to our joint accounts and records. That's when I uncovered the horrific truth. Darian hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd also blown through our life savings at casinos and strip clubs. I felt punch-drunk as I stared at the bank statements, watching our retirement fund get pillaged month after month. How could he have jeopardized our entire future like this? The man was a depraved gambling addict on top of being a cheater. When I finally mustered the courage to confront Darian face to face, he didn't even have the decency to appear remorseful. If anything, he grew hostile and tried to gaslight me. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he sneered after I slammed the statements on the table. "I'll pay it back. Just stop your hysterics." "With what money?" I fired back. "You've drained us dry chasing your vices like some immature frat boy." Darian's eyes flashed with rage. "Watch yourself, Marla. This won't end well for you if you keep pushing me." My stomach turned at his thinly veiled threats. The man I built a life with had mutated into someone cold, callous, and dangerous. In that moment, I realized our separation was the only path. There was no going back. "Get out," I stated firmly, staring daggers at him. "Get out of my house and life before I have you removed." "You'll regret this," Darian hissed as he grabbed his coat. "I'll take you for everything you're worth." His vicious parting words hung heavy in the air, even after he stormed out and peeled away in his sports car. I slumped into the sofa, emotionally and physically drained, as the magnitude of Darian's deception washed over me. This man had bilked me of my life savings, my trust, my future security, all while carrying on an affair right under my nose. Hot tears sprang to my eyes, quickly giving way to burning anger toward my soon-to-be ex-husband. He wanted to take everything from me? Fine. Two could play at that game. I knew Darian's crooked ways extended beyond our marriage. I had subcontractors and colleagues who glimpsed the shadier side of his business dealings. If he thought I'd go down without a fight after his appalling transgressions, he was sorely mistaken. It was in that moment, seething on my living room sofa, that the flames of revenge were stoked within me. Darian wanted to turn my world to ash. I would burn his to the ground. In the weeks after my blowout with Darian, I did some digging into his mistress Clarissa. I learned she worked as a corporate analyst at Simtech, one of our major rivals in molecular engineering. The pieces started falling into place. Darian's affair wasn't just personal indiscretion, it was a calculated professional sabotage. I contacted a few sources who had insider knowledge of Simtech's operations. One of them, an old colleague named Marcus, agreed to meet me at a quiet cafe downtown. "You know I'm risking a lot talking to you about this," Marcus said as he slid into the booth across from me. Even in the dimly lit cafe, I could see the strain in his expression. "I appreciate you coming," I said, keeping my voice low. "Just tell me what you know about Clarissa Mendiola and her ties to Simtech." Marcus sighed and rubbed his eyes briefly. "Look, Marla, I didn't want to believe the rumors at first, but I've seen too much shady stuff go down, things that can't be denied." He leaned in closer, glancing around us furtively before continuing in a hushed tone. "Clarissa isn't just some analyst. She reports directly to Richard Calderon, Simtech's CEO. They've been working closely on corporate intel and strategy to undermine companies like Corp. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Corp was my father Ronan's lifelong molecular engineering company, the one I had planned to inherit. "Are you telling me Clarissa's been gathering inside information from Darian to sabotage Dad's company?" I hissed through gritted teeth. Anger and disgust roiled within me. Marcus gave a grim nod. "That's what I've pieced together from whispers and mid-level leaks. Your husband has been selling corporate secrets that could cripple Corp if that intel reaches Simtech's upper ranks." White-hot rage lanced through me. That snake, Darian, hadn't just ruined our marriage. He'd put my family's entire legacy at risk with his lies and deceit. For whose benefit? His side whore at a rival firm? I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself as waves of fury crash over me. Marcus must have sensed the storm brewing, as he reached over and placed a calming hand on my arm. "Easy, Marla," he said in a low, measured tone. "I know this is a lot to process, but you need to keep your head on straight right now." I squeezed my eyes shut and took a few deep breaths to regain my composure. When I opened them, my jaw was set in grim determination. "You're right, Marcus. Thank you for risking so much to let me know the truth." I reached into my purse and pulled out a slip of paper, scribbling some numbers hastily. "This is my private line going forward. Keep any other updates unlocked. I'll make it worth your while." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes as he took the paper. Relief, admiration, perhaps a hint of fear. He gave a solemn nod. "You got it. Just be careful what you do with this information, Marla. These people are dangerous when cornered." "Don't worry," I stated flatly, holding his gaze with steely resolve. "They're not the ones who should be afraid." As I left the cafe, my mind was already whirring with possibilities, dark scenarios where I could avenge the deconstruction of my life. Darian's actions went beyond hurting me. He'd put my entire family at risk for his own selfish gain. That simply could not stand, not if I had any say in the matter. There, amidst the crowded streets and bustling traffic, I made a vow to myself and the legacy of my father's company. I would burn Darian's world to ashes. He betrayed the wrong wife. With the full scope of Darian's betrayal laid bare, I knew I couldn't embark on my revenge alone. I needed allies with intimate knowledge of the corporate landscape, people with skill sets to match Darian's own cunning. I decided to return to my childhood home and seek counsel from my father, the titan of Corp itself. As I pulled into the familiar tree-lined driveway, Memories of happier times flooded over me. This place represented security, family legacy, everything Darian's actions now threatened to undo. My brother Keith greeted me at the door with a solemn hug. "Heard you had a hell of a few weeks," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry, sis." I nodded, squeezing back tightly to keep my emotions in check. "It gets worse, Keith. There are some things I need to discuss with you and Dad." We found our father in his study, surrounded by architectural schematics for an upcoming product launch. Though graying at the temples, Ronan Granville still exuded a piercing intensity. "There's my girl," he smiled broadly, rising to embrace me. "You know you're always welcome back home." I managed a tight smile, drinking in the comforting scent of his Old Spice cologne, subtle reminders of a time before Darian's lies shattered my world. We made small talk to briefly catch up until Keith cleared his throat, a grave expression on his face. "Dad, Marla has something to tell us. Something serious about that snake, Darian." Our father's expression darkened as he sat back down, folding his hands on the desk. He gave a somber nod for me to continue. I spent the next half hour recounting the details: Darian's torrid affair, his plundered savings, and finally his corporate collusion with Simtech via his mistress Clarissa. As I spoke, equal measures of anger and disgust clouded both men's faces. "So this degenerate has been selling out my life's work to corporate spies?" Ronan's voice was low and dangerous when I finished. "All for the sake of money and some cheap thrill?" I held his blazing gaze steadily. "That's what my sources indicate. He's put everything we've built at risk, Dad. That can't be allowed to stand." Keith slammed his fist on the desk, fury etched in his features. "That son of a bitch, using you like that after everything." He shook his head disgustedly. "I'll kill him myself." "Steady, son," Ronan said firmly, raising a calming hand. "We can't be crude about handling this, not with so much at stake." He turned to me, his green eyes brimming with conviction and paternal devotion. "Marla, you know I'll back any plan to rectify this and protect our family's legacy. What did you have in mind?" For a long moment, I studied the determined faces of the two men I loved and trusted most in this world: my father, the embodiment of the American dream, and my brother, fiercely loyal to the end. Suddenly, the path forward became clear. "Darian has been meticulous in covering his tracks," I began, jaw set in grim resolution. "He's lured us into a carefully calculated trap using me as the entry point. If we want to unwind this tangled web and stop Simtech from bleeding us dry, we'll need to play chess against a true grandmaster." I leaned back, allowing the faintest hint of a cold smile to crease my lips. "Lucky for us, I happen to be brilliant at chess." Ronan and Keith exchanged looks, quickly mirroring my vengeful expression. In that moment, we became co-conspirators with a singular mission: to obliterate Darian Davies through the same calculated, strategic brilliance he'd used to deceive us all. The chessboard was set, with the future of Neuerkorp hanging in the balance. Darian had awoken a fury that would not be sated until he and his mistress were broken, discredited, and left with nothing. For the first time in weeks, I felt a swell of perverse optimism. All my life's training, all the corporate skills my father imparted, would now be weaponized against my greatest romantic adversary. Darian built this battlefield, but he was trapped on it, with an army that would show no mercy. My brother and father were the cavalry I'd been seeking. It was time to strategize our endgame and deliver checkmate to the traitors. Over the next few days, my father's study became our war room as we plotted the downfall of Darian and Clarissa. Whiteboards were covered in diagrams, timelines, and incriminating evidence. Keith tapped his underworld contacts for additional intel on Simtech's operations, while I strategized with Ronan on the most effective knockout sequences. "We need to discredit them on multiple fronts, professional and personal," I stated, poring over a thick dossier on Clarissa's corporate history. "A singular exposé won't be enough to bring down players this calculating." Ronan stroked his graying mustache pensively. "I'm inclined to agree. Darian in particular has been quite adept at covering his tracks over the years. We'll need an all-out blitzkrieg from various angles." "I may have a solution for that," Keith interjected, strolling into the study holding a burner phone. "My guy at Simtech has the skinny on when their big fiscal year kickoff party is going down. Huge shindig, all the major players and investors." He tossed the phone on the desk. "April 19th. at the Omni Grand Ballroom downtown. Private event, but a spectacular stage for some fireworks if you catch my drift. A slow smile spread across my face as the makings of a plan came together. You're absolutely right, Keith. What better place to detonate Darian and Clarissa's lives than in front of their peers and professional pantheons? I turned back to the dossiers, eyes alight with vengeful energy. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We first release an anonymous leak through Dad's inside channels at Newercorp. Vague details about corporate saboteurs within our ranks, feeding critical data to Simtech's leadership. Ronan nodded in approval, jotting down notes rapidly. Stoke the paranoia and sow disinformation. Soften the targets before the killing strike. Precisely, I affirmed. We let that simmer for a while until the party when we go public in a major way with ironclad proof of Darian's embezzlement and Clarissa's aggressively unethical intel gathering. Keith let out a low whistle, shaking his head in admiration. Pretty devious plan there, sis. Won't know what hit them. That's not all, I continued, undeterred. Darian doesn't just deserve professional ruination. I want his sordid personal vices dragged into the light as well. At this, Ronan's brow furrowed with concern. How so? Be careful we don't overstep any legal boundaries in our zeal. I waved a dismissive hand. Don't worry, Dad. I'm talking about hard evidence of his cheating and financial crimes. Bank statements, phone records, images, you name it. He portrayed me as the unreasonable spouse for years to cover his tracks. It's time I show the world his true nature as a compulsive liar and degenerate. A heavy silence hung in the air as Ronan and Keith processed the full scope of my proposed attack. Finally, my father gave a somber nod. You're right, Marla. We need to shatter these vipers utterly to protect our family's life's work. His green eyes smoldered with paternal intensity. They awoke a vengeful beast when they deceived you in this company. I say we deliver their ultimate undoing. Keith smirked grimly. No demon can escape the hellfire we're about to rain down on these two snakes. My brother's dark metaphor actually made me chuckle, a rarity in those tense, rage-filled days of plotting revenge. It felt empowering to have such unified support and commitment from my immediate family. For too long I'd been gaslit by Darian's lies and made to feel like the unstable one. Now, the tables were finally turning. As the sunshine faded outside the study's windows, I felt a steady confidence resonate within me. All the pieces were in place to obliterate Darian Davies and Clarissa Mendiola, to dismantle their lives just as they'd tried destroying mine. In less than a month, their worlds would crumble under the weight of their wicked deeds. I would deliver the fatal checkmate they so richly deserved, and I would savor every single delicious moment of their ruination. With our intricately laid plans in motion, the countdown began to the evening of April 19th, the night Darian and Clarissa would face their public immolation. In the weeks leading up to Simtech's big fiscal year gala, whispers and rumors began circulating about potential corporate saboteurs within rival companies like Newercorp. The disinformation campaign was working beautifully, sowing seeds of paranoia and mistrust. I could only imagine the private meetings and hushed conversations unfolding at Simtech's headquarters as their leaders postured over potential moles and leaks. Little did they know, the killing blow would detonate from the inside on the night of their celebratory event. When the evening finally arrived, I was a bundle of nervous anticipation getting ready in Keith's downtown apartment. We decided having me make a grand entrance would maximize the dramatic impact. As I zipped up my sleek crimson gown and applied makeup, I could feel the adrenaline thrumming through my veins in anticipation of the fireworks to come. At precisely 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a coded text from my father. "Falcon is in position." My heart rate quickened as I typed back an acknowledgement. Ronan, having accepted his status as an elite investor, had already infiltrated the Simtech event and was waiting to broadcast the digital evidence we'd leak at just the right moment. I heard a heavy rap at the apartment door, and Keith poked his head in, eyes steely. "You ready for this, sis? No going back after tonight." I stood and smoothed out my dress, giving him a cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. More than ready. It's rendered payback for every deceit those bastards have put us through. Keith held my gaze for a long beat before nodding firmly. "Okay then, let's go bury these snakes." The grand ballroom was awash in opulence by the time we arrived. Sleek ice sculptures, towering floral arrangements, and an orchestra playing soft jazz filled the palatial space. Darian and Clarissa were holding court with Simtex executives near the front, sipping champagne and reveling in their ill-gotten status. As we approached, I could see the surprise register on Darian's face, his brow furrowing when his eyes landed on me. I fixed him with a glacial stare and continued my regal advance down the center aisle, Keith at my side like an imposing bodyguard. By the time we reached the nearest secluded alcove, Darian had extracted himself to confront us, Clarissa in tow. His expression flashed from confusion to anger as I came to a halt just a few paces away. "Marla, what the hell are you doing here?" he hissed in a harsh whisper, eyes flicking around to the surrounding crowd distractedly. "This is incredibly inappropriate." I scanned his tuxedo-clad form slowly, lips pursing in disdain. "I've simply come to celebrate the culmination of all your accomplishments, dear husband. Oh, and to observe as your world dissolves into ashes tonight." Clarissa opened her mouth, but I silenced her with a raised finger. "Ah, not another word out of you, you vapid whore. The only voices that will be heard are the ones broadcasting proof of your trespasses to every soul here tonight." Anger contorted Darian's features as realization set in. "You stupid bitch, what did you do?" Before he could take another step, the crystal chime of glass clinking against glass filled the hall as the main stage curtains peeled back. There stood my father, eternally dignified in his tuxedo, smiling directly at the assembled throngs. "Esteemed guests, investors, and luminaries, welcome, and thank you for being here tonight to celebrate another fiscal milestone for our industry." Ronan paused, his expression turning grave and serious. "Before we commence our evening's true festivities, I feel I must address a matter of grave importance. It has come to my attention that elements within our professional ranks have not only been actively undermining upstanding ethical companies like Corp, but betraying the very trusts and relationships meant to safeguard our industries." A hush fell over the stunned crowd as my father's words sank in. Darian shot me a look of panicked disbelief, to which I responded with a slow, vindictive smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ronan called out solemnly, "I give you proof that the cancer of corporate sabotage has been living amongst us all along." With that, his assistants began playing video footage and documents across the massive screens behind the stage. Irrefutable evidence of Clarissa's detailed plans to cripple rival firms like Corp, emails and files indicating she had been receiving internal data from none other than Darian Davies himself. The fallout was nothing short of cataclysmic. As the incriminating videos and documents played out, hushed murmurs echoed through the stunned ballroom. Attendees turned on Darian and Clarissa, shunning them with hisses and glares of disgust. The erstwhile power couple suddenly found themselves radioactive pariahs in their world. Darian tried grasping at the fabric of his crumbling life. This is insanity," he sputtered, looking around desperately. "Those records were falsified. Someone is setting me up." "Save your lies, you sleazeball," Keith growled, stepping toward Darian menacingly. "Your sewage of a life is about to get flushed, starting now." Just then, another series of videos began broadcasting. Cold, hard proof of Darian's infidelity and gambling-funded excesses. Home video captured his tawdry nights with Clarissa. Bank statements showed exorbitant sums wagered and lost at casinos and strip clubs. One by one, his darkest secrets were mercilessly exposed to the assembled elite. Darian's eyes went wild, chest heaving with impotent rage as the damning personal artifacts flashed across the screens for all to see. Clarissa openly wept, her face contorted with horror and shame. All around them, former friends and colleagues looked on in abject revulsion. At last, Ronan stepped down from the stage, fixing his disappointed son-in-law with a withering look of pity and disgust. "For years, you failed to appreciate just how much grace you were shown, young man. My company welcomed you as family after the passing of Marla's first husband. We empowered you, educated you in the ways of our trade, all so that you could take your respected place among the titans of this industry." He shook his head slowly, eyes narrowing in contempt. "Yet you chose to desecrate that generosity at every turn. You defiled my daughter, pillaged our finances, and trafficked sensitive corporate intelligence to our enemies, all to satiate your baseless greed and licentious appetites. I could see the anger shaking through Darian as my father excoriated him, cheeks flushed and jaw clenched. With a visible effort, he steadied his breath before answering in a dangerously level tone. "You'll all regret this once the truth comes out. I was framed." "Enough," Ronan cut him off sharply. "We have all seen more than enough tonight, Mr. Davies. The only truth to be reckoned with is your vivid pattern of misdeeds and transgressions laid bare before this hall." My father leveled his focus directly on me, and I felt a surge of pride tempering the anger boiling within. "Thankfully, the integrity of my bloodline remains intact. Your own son Solomon and my beloved daughter Marla were the prime instigators of your inevitable undoing." With a subtle nod toward a side entrance, several imposing security officers appeared and strode toward Darian with cold professionalism. He backed away, eyes wild, shaking his head in furious denial. No, this can't be happening to me. I had it all, the life, the status, everything." The guards seized Darian by both arms and began dragging him toward the exit as he thrashed violently. "You vindictive bitch!" he screamed, looking directly at me with unmasked, venomous hatred. "I'll take you for everything, Marla. You hear me? Everything." I watched impassively as the guards hauled my soon-to-be former husband's vitriolic form out of sight, his furious threats echoing through the now silent ballroom. Clarissa had already fled in abject humiliation, following swiftly in her unraveled co-conspirator's wake. Just like that, their worlds lay in total ruin, their reputations, careers, social standing, all of it annihilated on the grandest possible stage. I felt a small, cruel smile tug at the corners of my mouth. They had awoken a relentless, merciless fury within me. Neither of them could ever comprehend the unspeakable violation they catalyzed, not just against me, but against my family and everything we stood for. They played their selfish games and cast their appalling betrayals. Now they would reap the legendary hellfire those transgressions deserved. My smile widened as the assembled gala-goers tentatively returned to their celebrations, shaken but clearly relieved to have witnessed such vile corruption excised from their ranks. Darian's pathetic unraveling may have concluded here, in this opulent palace of wealth and status he so desperately coveted yet never truly understood. But for me, this explosive resolution marked the stirrings of an incredible new beginning. A future where the deceitful, faithless wretch who tried breaking me would serve as a monument to the consequences of ever crossing my family again. In the weeks following Darian and Clarissa's cataclysmic downfall, the shockwaves rippled through our entire industry. Simtek's stock price plummeted as countless investors pulled out, leaving the company perilously unstable after the incriminating leaks surfaced. Investigations were launched into potential criminal conduct on multiple fronts. Darian, fortunately for him, managed to avoid prison time by swiftly signing away what remaining assets and finances he controlled. The proceedings left him destitute, exactly where someone of his moral depravity belonged. I couldn't muster an ounce of pity as the court renderings finalized his personal and professional dissolution. Clarissa was less fortunate. Her role as a corporate saboteur was severe enough to draw a 3-year sentence on federal racketeering and fraud charges. The last I saw of her in court, she was being led away in handcuffs, tears streaming down her cheeks as reality set in. Given how callously she trampled over innocent people to attain status, I felt zero empathy watching her hauled off like a common criminal. Once we had sifted through the ashes of our adversaries, the hard work of recovery and rebirth began. My father knew Darian had done severe damage to Neurcorp's operations through his profligate sabotage. We would need to rapidly rebuild our competitive stance while seizing new opportunities. To that end, he looked directly at me one afternoon as we charted the company's new course and made a decision that would permanently alter my world. "Marla, you are far and away the sharpest mind in this organization," he stated, quiet pride etched across his features. "You not only survived an unimaginable personal trauma, you spearheaded a silent war that eliminated those who sought to undo us all." I remained impassive, but couldn't mask a fierce blush at his praise. Everything I had achieved started from the betrayals and violations wrought by Darian, the man who had nearly broken me. Ronan stood and approached me, placing a firm hand on my shoulder as he held my gaze. You have more than proven yourself to be a fertile CEO material, my dear daughter. I am officially naming you as my corporate successor, effective immediately. For a long moment, I simply stared at my father with profound gratitude and humility. Corp meant the world to our family and stood as my mother's lasting legacy before she passed. To be entrusted as its new leader and torchbearer of the Granville dynasty, it was the highest honor imaginable. Thank you, Dad. I finally managed in a tight voice, embracing him tightly. I will do everything in my power to be worthy of this. He patted my back affectionately and smiled, those intense green eyes shining with pride. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt. In the ensuing months, Corp prospered under my uncompromising leadership. We were merciless in reacquiring top talent and aggressively outmaneuvering rivals left adrift by Simtech's disgrace. Our reputation was restored to an even higher pedigree through relentless innovation and marketing. I took particular relish in orchestrating the launch of our RG6 biomolecular sequencer, the pioneering product my mother had developed the framework for over 2 decades earlier. The symbolism was profoundly gratifying for me and my family. On the evening of the sequencer's highly anticipated unveiling, I stood on stage before an adoring crowd of investors, employees, and adulated peers. As I delivered my speech, I looked out over the thousands in attendance wrapped with awe and optimism. At that moment, I reflected on the crucible of trauma and betrayal that nearly unmade me not so long ago. Darian Davies had set out to crush my spirit, my livelihood, my very identity as a devoted wife and prospective inheritor of an industry titan. In the span of a few months, his avarice and infidelity had detonated my entire world. Yet through sheer resilience and the cunning of those who truly loved me, I persevered. More than that, I had utterly destroyed my tormentor and risen like a phoenix from the ashes he tried burying me beneath. His world was permanently erased, a footnote of history no one would miss. I, meanwhile, now stood as the head of a corporate empire my parents built from nothing, the charismatic new face of the molecular engineering field's future. As thunderous applause filled the arena, I allowed a serene smile to crease my features. Against all odds, I had achieved the most brutal yet spiritually profound of victories over the self-destruction clamoring from within. That was my true rebirth, I realized with a contented exhale. The rest was simply the natural order of karma restored.